We're going to start off with the biblical timetable. And I wanted you to have this because when I start talking about watches and times, I wanted you to actually see the times and everything in front of you instead of just trying to retain it. So time in biblical terms is referred to as watches. Just as the military assigns guard duty in watches, it's a literal division of time. A biblical watch has a 12-hour day and a 12-hour night equaling 24 hours. There are 4 watches in the day and 4 watches in the night. The time divisions are: day watches are 6 to 9 a.m., 9 to 12 noon, 12 till 3 in the afternoon, and then 3 to 6 in the evening. The night watches correspond to that with 6 to 9 in the evening, 9 to 12 midnight, 12 to 3 a.m., and 3 to 6 a.m. This also ties in with the Jewish day and how it starts evening and then morning. So it's been approximately 2,000 years since the church was born. Forgive my typos. The historical date was approximately 33 AD. We can say it was a new day when Christianity began because Jesus' death and resurrection changed the world. So this new day began the first watch in approximately 33 AD. So if you break the watches and the corresponding years down to hours, you'll find that each hour equals 166.6666 years. This time breakdown will enable you to follow history from the apostles' time through the present. It will even stretch beyond the present to show you that future prophecy is coming and what will happen. So the first watch of the new day begins like this. 6 to 9 a.m. would start at 33 AD. It was the first book of the New Testament, Matthew, was written, recording Jesus' ministry and preaching of the kingdom of heaven. The earliest, now we know this, and I want you to have the proof, okay? So somebody asks you, you can tell them. The earliest quotation of Matthew is found in Ignatius, who died around 110 AD. Ignatius of Antioch, Syria, was an early church father and was martyred around 110 AD. He was a disciple of John. After declaring his allegiance to Christ, Ignatius was condemned to die in Rome. And on his journey from Antioch to Rome, he was allowed to stop and visit Christians. And he wrote 7 letters which have survived to this day, addressing points of ecclesiastical order, which gives us a glimpse of how the early church functioned. Since Ignatius quoted Matthew, Matthew had to be written before Ignatius died. The second watch, from 9 o'clock in the morning till 12 noon. Now, if we take the 166.6666 times 3, because it's 3 hours, and add it to the 33 AD, it brings us up to 498 to 499 AD, century. That was the time of Pope Gregory, the Dark Ages, and the torture of early Christians using racks, screws, hooks, whatever. Okay, add another, it comes to like 498.99999. We add that to the 499 AD, and we're up to 12 o'clock noon till 3 o'clock, or 999.9999, or 1000 AD. Rome at its peak, the Holy Roman Empire. Christians were persecuted in arenas with the lions and fire and slavery, etc. So they've been being persecuted all this time. So the evening watch, 3 to 6 in the evening, if you add the 498.99999 to it, we come to 1499, or rounded off, 1500 AD. That was the time of Christopher Columbus discovering America. And of course, you know, God blessed America above all other nations. Why did he even do that? Because he raised America up to be friends to Israel. even though Israel wasn't there yet. It was the time of Martin Luther, Protestantism, bringing the gospel to laymen for the first time, because the scriptures were only previously available to the clergy. So during this last watch of the day, we can see that about the 11th hour of the 12th hour day watch, the corresponding year is approximately 1837. This was a time in history of great revival, interest in the Bible and God. The authorized version of the King James 1611 Bible has been written and translated into many languages and becomes available to the masses for the first time. The gospel is being spread throughout the land, and tens of thousands are saved through the preaching of the gospel. God is reaching out through his word to all who will read or listen. But in 1884, the end of the 11th hour of the day watch, the RV, or the Revised Version Bible, appears. Then in 1952, the RSV, Revised Standard Version, appears. And other versions follow: Good News Bible, Living Bible, etc. Now, what I'm going to say here is not that I'm condemning those Bibles. They're all written in the more modern language and English and everything that people found easier to understand. Using them so you can understand it, fine. I'm not condemning it. I go to those myself to help me clarify what I'm reading in King James, but I'm so used to the King James, because I got saved and grew up on that. So I'm not condemning it, but I want to show you why and when things started to change. Okay. So all these different versions began appearing. Now when they did, in a large part, the King James 1611 is thrown aside for the new modern version, translations. And there is a turn toward an ecumenical one world church. Why? Why the turn toward an ecumenical one world church? Now, it's not a concept that was set that people said, oh, we're all going to get a one world church. It was the baby steps towards what we're seeing now. Remember we talked about the Pope being up on the altar and inviting the shamans and the Buddhists and just everybody onto the altar with him, because what? We all worship the same God? No, we don't. And Rick Warren, you don't have to see eye to eye to go hand in hand. See, it's just like, it starts somewhere. It always starts with a little step. I Love Lucy and Ricky Ricardo had separate twin beds on TV. What do we have now?
Oh, yeah.
So little by little, it's done away with. So every other version since the authorized King James 1611 has over 30,000 places that conflict with the King James Version. And each version conflicts with other versions, so none match. When the King James 1611 was translated even into many languages and tens of thousands were saved, the other versions that were written and revised, the final authority of the Bible became blurred and questioned since so many versions existed and conflicted. So you see how it chips away. The changing of God's word was the beginning of the falling away of true Christianity, and people began looking toward their own opinions, see if this sounds familiar, as to what was the final authority. And they turned toward an ecumenical, one-world church, which itself blurred all beliefs into one brotherhood, right or wrong. So Jesus Christ and the Holy Scriptures were no longer the final authority. So I just wanted to put that in there so you could see where things started to change. At the end of the 11th hour of the day watch, things started to turn. So now we have the first night watch, which is 6 to 9 in the evening. This was exciting Because if you add the 498.9999 years to 1500, you get 1999.9799, or 2000. We all know what happened in 2000. The ending of 6,000 years. The sixth day for man ended in 2000. Right there at the first night watch. At this point, we have to understand that the day watches are understood as a timetable of the ages. Like we just came down every approximately 500 years, and you can see what was happening in history to the church during those times. However, the night watches are understood through parables and events that took place when Jesus was crucified. So we have to turn to one of the Lord's parables to get this understanding. And we're going to look at Matthew 20, 1-16, the laborers in the vineyard. And I'm going to go ahead and read the 20 verses of it, because I think it's important to actually say it and just say, well, talk about it without actually reading it.
You want somebody to read it to save
Yeah,
your voice?
Yeah, go ahead, you do.
For the kingdom of heaven is like unto a man that is a householder, which went out early in the morning to hire laborers into his vineyard. And when he had agreed with the laborers for a penny a day, he sent them into his vineyard. And when he went out the third hour and saw others standing idle in the marketplace, and said unto them, Go ye also into the vineyard, and whatsoever is right I will give you. And they went their way. Again he went out about the 6th and 9th hour, and did likewise. At about the 11th hour he went out, and found others standing idle, and saith unto them, Why stand ye here all the day idle? They say to him, Because no man hath hired us. He saith unto them, Go ye also into the vineyard, and whatsoever is right, that ye receive. So when even was come, the Lord of the vineyard saith unto his steward, Call the laborers, and give them their hire, beginning from the last unto the first. And when they came, that were hired about the 11th hour, they received every man a penny. But when the first came, they supposed that they should have received more, and they likewise received every man a penny. And when they had received it, they murmured against the good man of the house, saying, These last have wrought but 1 hour, and thou hast made them equal unto us, which have borne the burden and heat of the day. But he answered one of them and said, Friend, I do thee no wrong. Didst thou not agree with me for a penny? Take that thine is, and go thy way. I will give unto this last even as unto thee. Is it not lawful for me to do what I will with mine own? Is thine eye evil because I am good? So the last shall be first, and the first shall be last. For many be called, but few chosen.
Okay, now, to compare what we're going to study about this as compared to what I studied in Sunday school class one time, they made it about the union laborers and how things were unfair and how it's right as a Christian to join a union. And I'm thinking, there's got to be more to it than that. Okay?
Nothing wrong with that, because at the time, Dad was president of the Steelworkers Union.
At the time. But down the road, when I started getting a little more mature and starting looking at things for myself, then I've compiled these from things I've drawn through the years into notes, and I tried to put it together to make it cohesive now. So actually now, when I was typing this up, it surprised me of some of the things that I actually came to believe, because nobody ever taught it to me. I just, heard little things here and there. So what does this mean? It's not about labor unions. Okay? It's a little more spiritual than that. So we'll take the corresponding day and night watch times, and we're going to relate it to our timeline. Generally speaking, the significant periods of the 4 watches are 500 AD, 1000, 1500, and then 2000. So let's look at it from this parable point of view. In the early morning, which was 6 to 9 a.m., you'll see in verse 1, the goodman of the vineyard hired the laborers for his vineyard. Using this as a night watch, we would be entering the year 2000, because we're on the night watch now. It's already gone past. We're halfway through. The year 2000 was the beginning of the seventh day, the Lord's Day, the Sabbath day, and also beginning the 3 weeks of Jacob's trouble, according to our timeline. The third hour of the night, well, corresponding to the day, would be 9 a.m. to 12, is found in verse 3. He hired those who were idle in the marketplace. It was still in the morning. The sixth hour he did likewise, 12 noon to 3 o'clock. That's found in verse 5. He hired more laborers. The ninth hour, 3 to 6 p.m., also in verse 5, did likewise, hired more laborers. In the night watch, it would be nearing the end of the second watch, or the midnight hour, and the cock crowing, recalling Matthew 26:34, when Jesus said, "Verily I say who did he say it to? Peter. Verily I say unto thee, that this night before the cock crow, thou shalt deny me thrice." So you see the timing of that has nothing to do with the parable, that Matthew 26 has nothing to do with this parable, but you can see how it ties in according to the watches of the night. Jesus went through a night trial. He was dragged off in the night. Peter denied him in the night 3 times. So it does all tie in when you have the details of all the little events. So between the hours of 5 and 6 p.m., according to the 166-hour timetable, it would be the year 1837. Where did we see that before? Back in the day watch, the 11th hour of the 12th hour day watch was the corresponding year of 1837, the time of great revival and interest in the Bible and God. So here we are in the night watch. The 11th hour was the last hour of the day's work before the laborers are paid. Isn't that true? If you look back at the day watch then, the last ones before the tide turned, and before the tide turned and it started to go south. So the 12th hour, on the next page, the 12th hour is found in verse 12.
We're on page 4.
Yeah, it says 4 or 5, but there was only 4. It blanked me out the last one. These last, the verse says, "These last have wrought but 1 hour, and thou hast made them equal unto us, which have borne the burden and heat of the day." So in the 12th hour, they only had 1 hour to go. Where does that put us on the map, on the timeline? We're the last laborers. The question posed by the disgruntled laborers in verses 10 and 11, when first they came, they supposed that they should have received more, and they likewise received every man a penny. And when they had received it, they murmured against the good man of the house. The answer to that is this: the early workers represent the apostles, and the last workers represent the end-time workers of the 19th and 20th centuries. The first and second hired workers are up against lions, racks, screws, hooks, fire, and slavery, while the 20th century workers are up against denominations, politicians, slander, extortion, false doctrine, and an occasional lawsuit. Thus it appears that the early workers had it tougher, but that actually balances out because the 11th hour workers are up against a more subtle, internal, constant spiritual warfare. So both are paid equal wages, the first last and the last first. Note that the number 6 is the number of man. The Antichrist number will be 666. The hours of the watches are broken down to 166.6666. Man's number is just about up. We are number 6, and the 6,000th year has ended. We are the last laborers. We are in the last hour before getting paid. God's number is 7. He created everything in 6 days and rested on the seventh. The seventh is the Lord's day, and we know that the seventh day has no morning or evening to designate a beginning and ending. So we can look at where we are right now as being in a type of parenthetical pause at the beginning of the seventh day. Why? Because the 70th week, the last week, has not begun yet. We are almost out of the time, and of course that follows that is the kingdom. We are almost out of time, both historically and prophetically, but we're not to be afraid. In fact, our souls crave the spiritual food which we are about to eat in study in Revelation. We are to know what it is and what will happen, which is why John was given to write Revelation. Proverbs 25:2 says, "It's the glory of God to conceal a thing, but the honor of kings is to search out a matter." And we shall be kings according to 1 Peter 2:9. But ye are a chosen generation, a royal priesthood, and holy nation. He has made us unto our God kings and priests, and we shall reign on earth. But all we're looking for right now is that promise of a blessing in Revelation 3, just for simply reading it. So let's get started.